On the first week of my university life, when I got into my English classroom with the teacher teaching us the first English courses, he told us to join the debating club to improve our public speaking and our communication skills. I was very excited, so I went home that night and I was really about to get started to prepare my first resume to apply to be a debating club member. As I finished my dinner and I sat into my computer, looking into my Word document, an A4 blank page, thinking about what to write on my resume, I realized not only I never have written a resume, but also I have never ever done anything in the last 12 years of my life in my school that's worthy of mentioning that could get me into the debating club, that to becoming a good debater. So I was very embarrassed, and like any teenager would do, I wrote my name, I wrote my school name and college name, I increased the line spacing to 1.5 to get a little over the half page of the resume, and I still couldn't cover it up. I felt really bad, and I didn't know of anyone of such failure at that very moment than I myself could think of myself. So, like any other teenager, I went back to sleep thinking the sleep would solve the problem, but it didn't. So I woke up next morning and I realized I needed to go talk to my master shifu. And that person was my high school teacher in Adamjikan Public School, Shidal sir. So I went to him and I explained to him my situation, and he told me that you need to do two things. He said, the next 4 years, take the next 4 years as the cultivation period for the next 40 years of your life. Meaning, what you're going to do in the next 4 years is going to be the foundation for what you will achieve in the next 40 years of your life after graduation. I said, that's exciting, so I haven't lost everything yet. I still have 4 years to prepare for the next 40 years of my life. And the second thing he said is that never look yourself in the mirror. Now that was the most philosophical thing, Zen thing that I've ever heard in my life at that age. So I asked him, what do you mean by that? He said, if you're really working hard in the next 4 years, if you're really paying attention to your goal, using your blood, sweat, and tears, then you will have the signs of hardship in your face. And if you look into the mirror, you might just get carried away from that mission to build the next 40 years of your future. And that I understood as the most defining moment for my life, for my moment with my teacher that day. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are stepping into the next 50 years of Bangladesh's history. When you look at the Bangladesh history, you see that we have the last 50 years of Bangladesh history was filled with lots of struggles and successes, lots of trials and triumphs. But we still have, similar to my 4-year situation and first week of my university, Bangladesh still have the remaining 50 years of this first century to fill. Bangladesh still has the next 50 years worth of resume to fulfill for itself, but it's us to be writing it. And to me, just like that 4 years of my university years, that was pivotal to define the next 40 years, for Bangladesh, we're also in that same window of opportunity right now into the future to really build what Bangladesh we want to have for ourselves up next. Now, this is the most important slide of my presentation. This is the resume of Bangladesh. Each dots represent a year in the decades it's corresponding. And each dots has stories of hardship, stories of success. Some of the dots were defining years for Bangladesh, while some others were quite holding us back, not letting us move forward. Let's take a moment to sink that in for a while. How many of you ever thought about a resume for Bangladesh when you were starting to write your own resume? And this is a resume that not only has the last 50 years of Bangladesh, but it also has the blank pages like I had for the next 50 years of Bangladesh. The resume in the beginning of Bangladesh, if you look at the last 50 years, started with the first 2 decades of hardship, of trauma and recovery from the post-war of liberation. It was the most difficult times for the people who were helping us build the country from the scratch after the war. The next 3.5 decades of our resume is of the early stage of foundations, where we were actually working on learning how to run a country, operate a nation as an independent sovereign state. But then, just like any other resume, looking into the future, we also have a dream stage. A stage that we wish to be, But that stage is only possible based on a vision, based on a trajectory, based on a strategy that we set for ourselves to fill the remaining half of the resume, the remaining half of the next 50 years. And that is the most pivotal part of our journey right now, which I call the window of opportunity. Every country, every individual, every institution goes through such window of opportunities in its lifetime. When in a few years of time we get, it's like a door that opens in front of us for us to take charge forward and lead ourselves through that door to find a new horizon that we otherwise wouldn't have achieved. It is a door to accelerate ourselves from where we are to where we already should have been many decades ago, maybe. And to me, the next 6 years of Bangladesh is the most pivotal years of our life. If we want to have a future that's worth living, if we want to be in a country that we're all going to be proud of. And to me, those 6 years are the window of opportunity that I'm going to talk about today. Now, when we talk about history, it's very important to understand the concept of connecting the dots. And you're all very familiar with this concept because Steve Jobs beautifully put it, the idea of connecting the dots. We can connect the dots by looking backward, meaning once something we have experienced, when we have acquired something, when we have gone through something, we've been able to connect the dots looking backward. And it's extremely important to look backward to understand what went wrong and what we did right. But at the same time, I have another concept, because connecting the dots doesn't allow us to change our past. And past is never changeable anyway. But there has to be a model, a framework, for us to be able to change what happens in the future, which I call collecting the dots. Collecting the dots, I mean, is that you are actively, intentionally deciding on what you're going to do next. You're planning your future by deciding the best choices before you of the many options you have. Collecting the dots is a series of activities that you get involved in achieving what you want the best for yourself. And similarly, in Bangladesh, in the next 50 years, if we want to make the best choices for the country and for all of ourselves, we have to collect the right set of dots to build that future. Now, as much as we understand that collecting the dots or connecting the dots, but we also have to reflect a little bit on the past again. I will talk about two defining window of opportunities that we had as a country in the 1990s and in the 2000s that we missed big time. And as a result, a lot has happened in the future recent decades and will continue to suffer us. One such incident was when South and Southeast Asia was going through a massive transformation when the high-speed internet was finally getting connected using the subcontinental submarine cable. And during that time, the submarine cable made the information age for those countries that took the submarine cables, and it led to a massive foreign direct investments and talent development in those countries. And those countries are basically China, India, and Malaysia, to name a few. During those 90s and 2000s, these two countries decided to enter the information age by investing early on for the submarine cable, the high-speed internet, when we as a country were still using dial-up internet connection. And as a result, the companies from the West started investing in Malaysia, in India at large. For example, in Malaysia, the Fortune 500 companies started coming in the late 90s, which significantly increased their talent development locally, instead of waiting for the local talents to develop themselves. Google set up their office in India in 2004, making it the first major investments by a global giant, an internet giant, to really change the trajectory of what the country would eventually become. But during that very time, when this was happening in our neighboring countries, Bangladesh opted out of that submarine cable contract. Our government, our policymakers, our leaders, or whoever they were, no blames here, they just could not understand the importance of that window of opportunity. And we missed out on that. And then when people were starting to develop themselves into the next generation of skills, technology, IT, we are also lagging behind, and we fail to reform our education system and our skills growth trajectory as a nation. Now, this two window opportunities has significant impact, and here's how they impacted us in the long run. Now, I'm going to give an example of two countries, Bangladesh and Malaysia. We're very similar. Bangladesh and Malaysia has very similar GDP. Bangladesh has almost $450 billion. Malaysia is $408 billion. The two countries became independent about 10 years apart from each other. And during our independence, we actually were quite similar in terms of our GDP per capita, in terms of our infrastructure as a country as a whole. But if you look at what happened in the IT sector, remember the first window of opportunity was the internet, and the second was the training and development and the FDI that came into this country. As of last year, the IT sector contribution to the GDP in Bangladesh is only 1.28%. But in Malaysia, it's 23%. The national unemployment rate in Bangladesh is 40%. In Malaysia, actually, in Bangladesh, if you include the underemployment rate, it's 70%. But in Malaysia, it's 3.4%. The foreign direct investment in 2022-23 in Bangladesh was $3.4 billion. In Malaysia, it was $36 billion. And the productivity of our people in the SME sectors, which is one of the highest contributors of labor force in Bangladesh, is 6 times smaller than that of Malaysia. In numbers, our resources in the SME sectors produce on average around $4,600 a year, whereas in Malaysia, they produce $28,000 per year. That's how much of a difference we are in right now compared to those two countries. And this clearly shows what was the real reason why it's happening. It was a window of opportunity that we missed in the 1990s. In the 2000s, we are paying the price today. Much of the things that we complain about today, we are often complaining the present. We are complaining the current policy, the current government, the current institutions, but it has nothing to do with what's happening in the present. Because what's happening in the present is going to impact the future. But what happened in the past is impacting our present. Because the future that we live in was started building by somebody else a few decades ago, centuries ago. Now, every time people think about the Bangladesh, the image of Bangladesh, the foreigners, when they look about the Bangladesh image, this foreign image comes to mind. They think about this country's full of flood happening every year. People are literally struggling, the poverty. People are talking about that we are one of the biggest in the garments in the world, but also it's actually contributing to the fast fashion. They easily recognize us for our championship titles in the corruption. And lastly, are sweatshops. And sweatshop is not in the form of child labor, it's also in the form of, we are one of the cheapest destinations for anyone to do business. People do business with us because our labors are cheap, because they are at the bottom of the pyramid. And that's the resume we are holding, standing in 2024 today, of the last 25 years. But what should have happened is that a resume like this, in the next 20, 50 years of our country, where we should be able to completely redefine by actively and intentionally designing what we're going to do next. And I just don't want to talk about this window of opportunity, I also want to give a solution for that. I think one of the most important things about countries, nations, or any geographies is what absolute advantages we have over someone else. A country is as good or as big or as important as either the natural resources it contains, it has within its own geographic boundaries, or it is the human capital that it has and has produced over time and has trained over time to really stand tall, both in local developments as well as in the global stage. So to do that, as a dreamer myself, I believe that instead of thinking about those 4 images that I just showed in the previous slide, we need to have a reset of the narrative or the vision of Bangladesh that we want to build. We should be the global epicenter of talents. In few centuries ago, Bangladesh was an epicenter of talents from all over the world. In Bangladesh, in the Bengal, the region of Bengal, people used to speak 14 languages because of the colonization that happened, because of the trade that happened, because of that amazing manufacturing that happened of handlooms and many others. And I think it's time that we go back into that history by building Bangladesh as a global talent epicenter. To do that, my contention is, if you focus on these 4 pillars: entrepreneurship, innovation, education, high quality education, and most importantly, equal opportunities for all, regardless of where they come from. And to support these 4 pillars, to be a global epicenter for talents, we need to work on some catalysts. And those catalysts are homegrown talents. We keep talking about demographic dividend, but we are actually not getting any dividend from them, because most of them are leaving this country, and those who are staying are not being properly developed to lead the country. Second, we need to have strategic partnerships, both internally and externally, so that we can build the future in a much more co-creation manner, in a collaborative manner at scale. Third, we have a lot of non-residency Bangladeshis living in this outside Bangladesh for years. They have done good for themselves already. It's time they come back and give back to our society. It's time they come back and build the next 50 years of Bangladesh. We can no longer complain to our future past generations who did already what they could do for us. And lastly, Bangladesh will not have any foreign direct investment from Google and Facebook, in my opinion, because of strategic reasons, political reasons, whatever that is. Meaning we cannot have the Googles and the Microsofts of the world come to Bangladesh and start building their businesses. But what we can do, we can attract high quality, mid-career talents from all the Fortune 500 companies, all parts of the world, over a period of 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, entrepreneurship visa, innovators visa, scientific research visa, that they can not only come and do it here, but also train the next generation of Bangladeshis to become a global standard as well. I want to end by remembering something from the past again. I was born in the mid-80s in Ghadirabad cantonment, Bogura, in a military family. When I was born, my dad had a monthly salary at that time, was roughly around 1,500 taka. And over the next few years, he had to raise a family of 5. And because we didn't have any family wealth, we could not afford to go to top private schools, be it English medium or Bengali medium. So we actually ended up taking the advantage of the privilege that we had being born in a middle class family, serving the government. In the military, I went to all the Kent public schools that there was. By going to those Kent public schools, I was fortunate. I had the privilege of not paying the tuition fee, although the quality of education was much better. Because somebody was paying their taxes to make my education almost close to free. Somebody was sacrificing their time to stay in Bangladesh, to grow the country forward in the last few decades. The government was really doing their best to make sure that we are educated. And I am a product of those taxpayers' money. I am a product of those people. I am a product of those people who sacrificed in the last 50 years of Bangladesh to build to where we are today. What's important for us to recognize is that the present that we stay today, as I mentioned, was already being built by someone 50 years ago, centuries ago. And for us, the responsibility is to build the remaining half of our lifetime, to build the next 50 years of Bangladesh. And to do that, there is no alternative but a choice. And to that I say, and to all of you, that it is our choice going forward as human beings, as a citizen, as students and teachers, as government officials and private sector leaders. It's our choice, not chance, not what happened in the last 50 years, but what we choose to do in the next 6 years, in that small window of opportunity that we have before us, to build the best next 50 years of Bangladesh. Thank you very much.